Okay. Well, here's our agenda. We're going to be going through sort of hot topics of the day. But before we get to those trend topics, a little bit of a preamble. So, you know this in your gut, that it feels like the last year has been a roller coaster ride, right? The macro environment, we came out of the pandemic with all this stimulus that drove up inflation, that caused the Fed to hike interest rates, and that put a pall on the economy, the threat of a potential recession. We had global warfare. Oh my God. Every possible macro variable went berserk in the last year. And meanwhile, the stock market kind of gyrating in the meantime. It really does feel like a roller coaster ride. And one of the consequences of this, it caused for companies to focus internally. Rather than external growth measures, they decided to focus on their own house. And after 2022, when their stocks, big tech stocks, were cut in half, no wonder they wanted to focus internally. And they all got the memo. So if you look at the EBITDA margins, the average EBITDA margins of public companies, whether it's big tech or the independent public Adtech and MarTech companies, they went up 6 to 7% on average. Back half of 23 versus back half of 22. In other words, they all got the memo, they all cleaned house, and they all massively improved their EBITDA margins. And how did they do this? They did some job cuts. Some companies, did some focusing, eliminating silly things that didn't make any sense. And then, of course, they rolled out AI products. While everyone else was talking about AI, big tech actually rolled them out and made money with them. In fact, Scott Galloway likens this to corporate Ozempic, right? Combination of sort of weight loss with job cuts, as well as supercharging things with AI. And the results are incredible, right? These large tech companies are up massively in terms of market cap. The whole market, in fact, is up. And some of these increases just in the last year are up to, over $500 billion. So huge impact to these measures. But it doesn't come cheap. AI, yes, it's great, it's innovative, look at all these new products, but it's also very competitive amongst those large companies, and it's expensive. Just the top 3 companies alone, Google, Microsoft, and Meta, between 23 and 25, will spend close to $400 billion on AI. By the way, that greatly exceeds the entire market cap of all independent Adtech and MarTech. So this is a game for very, very large players. It also tells us that whether it's open or closed, AI, like railroads, is going to be a utility. All companies are going to be able to utilize these very, very powerful tools. But there's one thing that utilities have in common. They're regulated. And we also have noticed, besides AI having an impact across the space, the increase in big government. Whether it's in Capitol Hill or in Europe, we are seeing all kinds of different facets of big government that heretofore had largely left technology alone. So obviously, we've had privacy legislation on a ramp both domestically and in Europe for some period of time. But now we're seeing rather stringent antitrust legislation in Europe that's questioning the very premise of the internet business model. We're seeing antitrust lawsuits here in the US. Almost pretty much every major tech company is on the receiving end of a government action to go after them for actions that they're doing in the ecosystem, and they're actively blocking deals. And this, yes, it affects the specific deal that gets blocked, but it's far more than that. It actually puts a pall on M&A activity as big government steps in to question almost everything that companies are doing. Companies then get reticent to enter into deals with the fear that the government's going to block it. And then finally, foreign ownership. I mean, we've even seen Capitol Hill take action with respect to foreign ownership, for example, with TikTok. So a lot of government coming into a sector that heretofore had largely not had a lot of government.
But look, I mean, Terry, it makes sense that big government's coming in. This is big business. If you look at digital ad spend globally, it's expected to exceed $650 billion this year. growing 13%. And that growth is only expected to continue over the next number of years. Before the end of the decade, global digital ad spend is going to be over $1 trillion. It's a trillion with a T. So this is a huge and growing ecosystem. Makes sense that they're coming in. But it's also bringing tons of other constituents into this ecosystem. Terry and I talked about this last year at DMS, which is this notion of ad tech is eating the world. And this only continues to become more true year after year with the number of new players coming into the space. And it's people with data, like the commerce and retailers, the finance players, people with inventory and consumers like travel, and entertainment companies that that previously had said they were completely against advertising are now all moving in, looking to monetize their audience and their capabilities with advertising. And there's even defense contractors talking about coming to this ecosystem. Ultimately, this aspect of new entrants is something that's always driven the digital ad ecosystem. It creates new growth, it creates new innovation, and it creates a lot of opportunities. It's not just there, it's also in the public markets. As we all know, the public markets have been very challenging over the last 2 years. Very few new entrants, especially on the technology side of things. But if you actually pull back and look at who has come public, the majority of the technology-driven deals over the last 2 years, or really in the last 9 months, have all been around advertising and marketing. You've got Ibotta and Reddit this year, Instacart and Klaviyo last year, all getting out and doing relatively well in what is, frankly, a very challenging market. We looked at, we talked about roller coaster, and we looked at Adtech, and this is not an ecosystem for the faint of heart. It is completely a roller coaster, and it is an accelerating roller coaster. So if you're to look at the Adtech cohort and the number of single-day price changes of 20% of up or down, there have been 87 in the last 4 years. And in fact, 50% of those have just happened in the last year. So we are in a constant up and down, creating lots of uncertainty, definitely a challenging market. But the good thing underneath that is that growth is now starting to come back. We've all been in this sort of area of uncertainty, as Terry said, sort of focused inward, focused on the bottom line. We're now starting to hit this point where across the Adtech cohort, people are starting to drive more organic growth, get more sure footing in their businesses. We're not going to go into too much detail on all the market stuff today. We do have our full market report. Just came out the other week, so definitely go to our website to download all of that. But we're going to focus more on the higher level trends here.
So this roller coaster ride, not only is it affecting the stocks of the public companies in the space and the revenues and the business models of all involved, it's also affecting another cohort that's really, really, really suffering, investment bankers. So as it turns out, all of this macro uncertainty and inward focus are hampering M&A activity. Last year was almost a decade-long low in M&A activity. This is actually a selfie I took of me in the middle of last year when I saw the volumes drop. But seriously, usually you talk about the delta, the amount of activity in the space as a delta between seller expectations and buyer expectations. Last year, there was no buyer expectations because buyers weren't even talking about M&A. And so remember, macro uncertainties, tremendous fear of a recession that never came. And now we've got reinvigorated ad spend and growth in the marketplace. What do you do about that? Well, you can't cut your way to growth, right? And so we believe M&A is going to be necessary to reinvigorate growth as we step forward. In fact, we would recommend a 3-year industry plan. 2023 was all about survive, 2024 revive, and 2025 will thrive. So let's all hope for that as our plan going forward. Let's talk about the open web. Much has been discussed about this. But 3 years ago, we came out with this idea of the creation of a new category. We used to think of the world as either walled gardens or open web. And we've really seen with CTV and commerce media and gaming and audio, the rise of what we call hedged gardens. And there's no question that ad spend is shifting from open web into walled gardens to be perceived more closed loop, more privacy safe. But we're also seeing a shift or a usurpment of the open web into hedged gardens, right? Curated environments, first-party data, et cetera. And of course, it is the shift from third-party data where we had scale, ubiquity, and ease, but lacked fidelity, control, and privacy, to a first-party world where those have now shifted. And that's what's really driving this change. And yet, we seem to be, the football or the cookie keeps getting yanked away from Charlie Brown since Chrome keeps deferring when we are going to actually deprecate the cookie properly. And, look, this is a major driver for folks in the open web, and it's having its impact. So, there's no question that there's headwinds against companies that are doing primarily audience-based media buying and measurement, by the way. And so they'll have to sort of deal with this new environment where we won't have this ubiquitous third-party tracker. It's good news for the next two categories, right? The data collaboration companies creating basically workarounds to continue to do audience-based media buying, albeit on a privacy-safe basis. There are tailwinds in that category. There are also tailwinds in the alternative methods category, the cookieless and non-audience-based targeting capabilities. But here's the thing. Oh, and by the way, this also ought to help out of home, because that's a sector that's not really worried about cookies, and as well audio, podcasting, advertising continuing to grow. But here's one thing we would say. Based on pattern recognition, we've seen this before, we are not probably likely to see a lot of M&A activity until after the event takes place. If you think about GDPR, everyone knew it was coming and no one made a move because they didn't have to. And this industry is still going to be utilizing third-party cookies up until the minute it can't. The smart ones will prepare, but in terms of M&A activity, what we saw with GDPR was most of the activity happened afterwards. Same thing with Apple's imposition of ATT and with cookie deprecation. Yes, there have been a couple of deals done, mostly for defensive value, but we believe that the preponderance of activity will happen afterwards. Look, there's a lot of issues that have popped up in this industry around nefarious or sort of bad actors or sort of wrongful practices that companies are making. We put this all under the category of shenanigans. And yes, Adtech has had this kind of level of shenanigans for a while, but it feels, folks, like it's about high time we kind of cleaned up our act in this industry. And I would say that the good news is that we're talking about it. The trade publications are doing a good job. The IAB is doing a good job. The press is doing a good job. But also, individuals are speaking up, and I think it's worth calling out. And by the way, if you don't believe me, go to www.3.lumapartners.com for more information. I forgot that joke. But besides the media and the trades, there are individuals that are speaking up about this too. And just a little call out, this is just some of the people who have been raising the specter of these challenges, whether it's killing news or bot traffic or spoofing or all of these issues. We appreciate these voices speaking up and airing what is essentially dirty laundry, right? Because it's high time. And ladies and gentlemen, the observation I've said to folks privately, and I'll say it publicly, is this is a Peter Pan industry. It refuses to grow up, right? Think about it. What we need is rationalization of an industry. Like every other industry, over time, and especially at the one at the scale that we have here, what we need are fewer players doing higher volumes at lower take rates with better quality. And ladies and gentlemen, this is a call to action. Like, come on, grow up, Adtech. It is high time.
Commerce media, this is a topic we've been talking a ton about. We've got limited time, so we're going to do this very quick. You may have heard this spiel from me already, but one of the things that interests us the most about commerce media is it's got this dynamic of being a channel and a layer, something we haven't seen since mobile, where initially for years people were talking about the year of mobile, what's this new channel going to be? And it's actually a layer, right? Everything is mobile and desktop together. It's not an individual channel. Commerce media is the same. You've got retail media, which is a new channel. It's new places for inventory. But really, there's the bigger opportunities around this layer concept. You've got commerce data coming in across the full ecosystem. This isn't necessarily new. There's been commerce touch points across the digital ecosystem for a long time. Affiliate marketing, influencer marketing, cost per acquisition, advertising, all is tied towards commerce data and closing that loop, but it's getting much broader and it's actually moving up the funnel. We're seeing a lot more opportunity with audiences. But the thing I want to talk about today that's a little different is we were thinking a lot about this concept around the world moving to trifurcation, right? And if you think back historically, there was a very clear divide between walled gardens and open web, and they really did not cross over between each other. But we're starting to see all of these worlds cross into each other, and commerce media is really the driver. So commerce media, very much, again, retail media, hedge garden, new inventory, new channel. One of the biggest focuses in this space is moving off-site. And so you're seeing tons of partnerships with open web technology companies who are leveraging commerce media data to then drive further inventory that commerce media is monetizing. It's not just there, it's with other hedge gardens too. There's more announcements in the last week, and I'm sure there's going to be more in this next week with upfronts around TV companies, device manufacturers, everyone in the CTV ecosystem partnering up with different commerce platforms to get access to data and help it inform their inventory. But importantly for this space is also the walled gardens. Now, you didn't see many CTV companies or open web companies partner up with the walled gardens because there was no need to. But you do see that with commerce. There's Walmart and Amazon and Targets and all the rest do a lot with Google and Facebook and others because they are bringing commerce data to bear that those platforms don't have. I think importantly this year you saw Amazon and Meta announce a big partnership, which is something you never would have seen before because they didn't need access to that data when they could track consumers. Now that they've lost data signal, there's all of a sudden this opportunity. The challenge is today, most of this is pretty disparate, right? There's walled gardens partnerships, there's open web partnerships, there's CTV partnerships. The real opportunity here is that you can bring all of this together and start to optimize across these channels uniquely with commerce data. And Amazon is starting to do this, right? They have a DSP, they've got CTV, they've got the walled gardens. They're very much on that track. We think there's a big opportunity for more of the open ad tech ecosystem to start to come into this as well. And the reason is fragmentation. So if you've heard me talk about this before, this is one of the reasons we were excited initially about commerce media. It's got the scale, first-party data, automated performance, and closed-loop attribution that search and social had. It's got one other critical component, and that's fragmentation. It's not dominated by a single company, and it can't be, because most of commerce happens offline, in-store. It requires massive amount of CapEx to get consumers. You have to have stores. You have to have inventory. It's a much more difficult challenge, and so it's going to remain fragmented. What fragmentation means as you bring in retail media and commerce media is massive amount of complexities and inefficiencies in trying to buy across all these different platforms. That inherently is the need for intermediaries, and that is Adtech and Adtech's margin opportunity, which is why we're so excited about this. And if you think about that notion of connecting across the ecosystem, again, it's the reason why Adtech can play a role in that overall change. What does fragmentation and complexity and all that also require? Standardization. It feels like retail media is sort of the digital ecosystem in the mid-aughts, right? You have massive sales teams, people are selling inventory, really focused on that, all trying to sell their own measurement. There's no standardization. It's definitely keeping the industry behind. There's a huge opportunity here as many different constituents are trying to drive further standards to this space to really scale it. That also comes with this shift from ad sales to ad ops. Again, if you go back to the mid-aughts, most digital publishers were massive sales teams. We weren't focused on programmatic yet. Oh, that's just the remnant inventory. That'll come later. Everyone in this room knows it's somewhat inevitable. You find a scaled digital ad channel, and it's going to shift from direct selling to campaigns to more standardization and moving towards really optimizing the operations, not just sales.
All right, let's talk about CTV. In fact, let's talk about TV. I mean, people talk about the growth of CTV, but let's shout out to linear TV ad spend. It's hanging in there. We need an emoji or a symbol. There we go. It's hanging in there. And that's actually one of the more incredible things is just how resilient the bundle and the revenue around linear TV is relative to kind of what's going on. Now, We all know what's supporting the little kitty, right? It's live sports, ladies and gentlemen. The NFL, in fact, is primarily supporting the cable bundle. And yes, we know that CTV is the growth vehicle, and we in this room want to focus on that aspect of it. We noticed that the tech giants are all investing in live sports with substantial campaigns and efforts and funding around various sports. And we believe it's only a matter of time. By the way, Roku, Yahoo, lots of other smaller tech platforms also getting the memo, Netflix perhaps, on live sports. So we're going to see more and more of the tech companies focused on live sports. That's the Achilles heel of linear TV. And if we think about this, is a concept we started talking about 6 years ago. Think about the comparison. Who's going to win in this race, right? Big media or big tech? In January of 2020, we called out, look how much bigger big tech is than big media. Well, in the interim 4 years, big media lost about $500 million of market cap. Big tech gained $4.5 trillion, and so there is simply no comparison. And now think about sports. It's invariable that when these contracts get renewed, they're going to go to big tech, and that will be, of course, the instigator towards the continued decline of linear and shift to streaming. I mean, just some of these contracts dwarf the market caps of the media companies, so it seems inevitable. The clicker's not working. There we go. Ultimately here, media companies need to successfully transition to streaming, and it hasn't been an easy transition, right? You've got severe challenges, probably the single most important one being that media companies were in the B2B business, and they're now forced through streaming to get into the direct-to-consumer business. They don't really understand that business, and you can see it from the churn. These companies are having to reacquire their customers 2, 3, sometimes 4, 5 times per year, and that churn has massive implications. There's lower ad loads, and of course the loss of affiliate fees is what's hampering that. How have they responded? Simple. Rebundling, wholesaling, and consolidation. So you are seeing some of these streaming channels realizing they're only going to continue to lose money in streaming, and so they're packaging, repackaging, and in some cases, going back to the old wholesale business that they used to be in. But listen, if all we did was transfer eyeballs from linear to streaming, that would be a big loss. That'd be a big miss. The real opportunity in CTV is to bring the digital attributes to the big screen so that we can have all the kinds of capabilities around targeting and precision and performance that we do in digital and apply that to TV. And in fact, democratize TV ad spend. If you think of it in a chart, historically, TV ad spend was in the head. It was only hundreds of very, very large advertisers that would utilize the TV channel. Well, the real opportunity here, folks, is to go to the long tail and the more performant advertisers, and it just so happens that that will build a substantially better business model with more operating leverage. Note that the large tech companies all have one thing in common. They have thousands, if not millions, of small advertisers. And that, we believe, will bring a lot of health and vigor to CTV. And on the supply side, we're also seeing a sort of like a different type of fragmentation occurring, but noting that in that top 5, there's really only 3 big tech companies, Google, Netflix, and Amazon, and then Disney being the largest big media company. So we're going to see a reconfiguration of the fragmented hierarchy in streaming. And let's not forget, that's just the typical definition of what is quote-unquote TV. You know from your own kids that they're consuming short-form video on a vertical phone, which increasingly is going to be, maybe it's not TV, but it's in quotes TV. And we note that YouTube tomorrow is doing their broadcast event at the upfront events, not the new fronts. So it's clear that these companies are all coming after the same entertainment, the same eyeballs, the same budgets as TV. Much has been talked about competitive measurement, and there are some. I think some of these competitors are bringing new forms of performance and census-based measurement, which I think is healthy for the ecosystem. but we would also note that every major media company has renewed with Nielsen. So the currency wars perhaps are not so much of a war as we might have thought. And then finally, ad formats. Again, if all we're going to do is 15s and 30s, that's not taking advantage of the unique attributes of the digital channel. We are seeing innovation around interactive, shoppable, pause screens, and even product placement with AI that I think is going to bring new blood to the CTV ecosystem.
Another part of the digital ecosystem we want to spend some time on is the creator economy. I think it's an area that this world ad tech hasn't paid too much attention to. It's mostly been driven by agencies, but it's a large multi-billion-dollar business. And I also think as we've dug in deeper, it needs a reframing here. So the way most of us think about the creator ecosystem is these UGC, influencer marketing, anyone who's creating an audience and then monetizing it with advertising is the ultimate goal. But really, creator is a much broader definition. It includes journalists, scientists, athletes. I mean, hell, I know bankers that are creators. Ultimately, these are all creators, and it's really coming down to there's a much broader shift of brand power from the enterprise to the individual that's been going on for a long time now, and I think it only accelerated with COVID. Consumers increasingly are looking for a personal connection in where they're sort of following what they care about, and it's across the board. You've got things like media you listen to, right? I listen to Kara and Scott. I know it's owned by Vox, but I'm probably the few because I'm in the media ecosystem. During the women's basketball run, we were all following Caitlin Clark. I mean, it happened to be Iowa basketball, but that sort of was beside the point. And you can see it in how people are following them and where the attention is going. Just look at their followers of where they're gaining this, the creator aspect. There's far more followers to the individuals than the actual enterprise side of the brand. And if you take this lens back and look at creators in a different way, it's creating a massive amount of variation in how creators are monetizing. It's, at the top end, you've got, the creator pools that the platforms are paying. You can do influencer marketing affiliate. You can do other media, and then people are looking at merchandise, services, books, et cetera. Effectively, you've got this funnel, right, from the mass audience to loyal followers and how you can monetize them. What we're seeing is that there's really becoming two different types of creators. You've got those who are creator first, audience first, that have built a big brand and are now trying to move down funnel. And you've got those like Andrew Huberman or Brene Brown who started with an expertise and actually have changed their monetization and changed their opportunities by leveraging the creator aspect. So audience first, the big focus there is driving down and driving brands. The product experts are leveraging these platforms to garner much bigger distribution, find new forms of monetization. What this is doing overall that we're noticing is this emergence of the creator marketing funnel. And I think this is particularly true in what's happening with the big platforms. As Terry noted, you've got YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, TikTok. All these platforms are increasingly pushing creators towards these short-form opportunities that have massive awareness, massive distribution, but actually are very tough to monetize for them. It's great for platforms. It's tough for creators. And so what creators are starting to do is they're thinking about, how do I take my audience, move them down the funnel, capture that audience, start to own them, collect information, get them to subscribe, own my media monetization, do direct deals, build community. And then one step further, right? How do you then take that same audience and start selling products, sell subscriptions, sell courses, host events? This is, all creators are taking the notion of not just what's my audience and how do I monetize that reach, but how do I think of myself as a business and start using marketing automation, marketing technology, and advertising technology like all other businesses do. And the reason this is so important is that the monetization for them is inversely correlated here. So awareness and distribution and the creator pools, there's some money there, but it's not that large. As they move down to really capturing and owning their audience, there's a lot more from a control and reach perspective. But the real money has really shown up in selling products, creating merchandise around that. Just ask Ryan Reynolds or Rihanna. The other thing that happens is as they move down the funnel, they start to lessen their creator platform dependency. So at the top, they're very dependent on what the platforms decide to do with their algorithm, what they decide to do with creator pools. As they move down the funnel, there's a lot more opportunity there. And ultimately, what does this mean for this room? Well, as these new businesses are starting to think through this, that's where there becomes a big technology opportunity in helping, again, a massively fragmented ecosystem. So like commerce media, there's millions of creators out there and millions of opportunities for people to reframe how they think of themselves as a creator and start to move from that awareness down the funnel. And that's really where we see a lot of opportunity coming in that space.
And just a final note on creative tech, we're going to have a whole breakout session to delve into this properly. But if you think about it, you know, AI and media and marketing were kind of made for each other, right? Massive data sets for learning and a broad spectrum of applications that I would argue really do sit on a spectrum. So you've got data, workflow, and media. Those have been assisted by sort of machine learning type of AI now almost since the get-go. Then you're sort of got a second category of sort of creative, ad creative, and content. This is more in the generative AI opportunity sort of grouping. And then finally, way out there on the spectrum, and this is a spectrum of evolution to revolution, is navigation, which we'll talk about. Interestingly, you know, there has been a tremendous amount of activity, focus, investment, deal activity in both media and data. The two aspects of ads that answer the where and the who. But the what, creative, what you're actually showing the audience is probably the single most important part. And from an investment standpoint, historically, that has been crickets. And we believe that we're an inflection towards something that's going to be give that a lot more prominence. Because at the end of the day, the AI that assists with data, workflow, and media is great. It optimizes for efficiency, better, cheaper buying. Whereas for creative and content, it's software that optimizes for effectiveness. And at the end of the day, we think that's really going to drive better outcomes. And then finally, and this is sort of in the who knows category, in terms of navigation, I mean, generative AI has the potential to sort of reinvent search and potentially even reinvent websites. I mean, who needs to put data on a website that you'll never navigate to if, in fact, the large language model will just find and give you your answer? You don't need to navigate anymore. So it has very dramatic and substantial implications. That, ladies and gentlemen, is our state of digital. We will be publishing that later this week for you all to review. Thank you very much.